أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، ثم الصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين، الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين، والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكادمية والحجج الرضوية والجود الثقفية والنقابة النقبية والهيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة لأولي الألباب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To give the Imam of our time our condolences upon these nights, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Whenever there is a significant event, an event which impacted the outcome of the world, an event which impacted future events, you find that there are different interpretations and understandings of such an event. For example, within 70 and 80 years, we saw an event where the entire world was involved in a war, for example. Even an event as recent as that, there are individuals based upon their own biases and based upon their own understandings, they'll have a different interpretation of this event than other individuals. That's why every event which is significant has undergone through this reality. And the event on the day of Ashura in the land of Karbala is no exception. That's why when you look at the different views about what took place on the day of Ashura, there are many conflicting reports. And there is a need to discuss that how did the details of the event of Ashura reach us? As in every single year when Muharram comes around, you find that a number of questions are begun to be asked. For example, people ask the question that what was the age of the son of Imam al-Hussein Ali Akbar? Was he 18 years old or was he 27 years old? Or for example, people will ask the question that was there a wedding on the day of Ashura where Imam al-Hussein married Qasim, his nephew, off to one of his daughters, for example? Or people will ask the question that who was the first to be martyred from the Ahlul Bayt? Was it Ali Akbar or was he from amongst the final to be martyred upon that day? This is why when we come to examine the event of Karbala, it is important for us to understand that what are the sources and how did this event actually reach us at the end of the day. Because when we look at those who wrote about the event of Karbala, there were many people who came from different backgrounds, and obviously coming from different backgrounds, you're going to have different biases, you're going to have different perspectives. When we look at those individuals who've written about the event of Ashura, we find that it ranges from the staunchest of the anti-Shia to traditional Shia scholars. For example, there was an individual by the name of Ibn Abd Rabbi. This individual wrote a famous book about the Masayib of Imam al-Hussein, but he was very well known to be an anti-Shi'i. We find another individual like Al-Khawarizmi, who wrote a famous Maqtal. At the end of the day, he is a Sunni. But on the other side of events, we find that there were classical traditional Shia scholars who wrote about the event of Ashura. Somebody, for example, like Sayyid ibn Tawus, he writes a Maqtal called Al-Luhuf ala Qatl al-Dufuf. Or you find that Allam al-Majlisi compiles a large amount of narrations in volume 44 and 45 of Bihar al-Anwar on this subject. So when we have such a broad range of individuals writing about the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein, we need to understand that what was the methodology that they used and what is the background that they are coming from. Because obviously your methodology is going to have an impact on your conclusion. And I'll give you an example. When we look at the historical sources about the day of Ashura, the historical sources, they mention that the tribe of Banu Asad are those who buried Imam al-Hussein on the 13th of Muharram. However, over here, we find that we have a theological principle. And that theological principle states that only an imam can bury an imam. So in this example, you find that your background plays an impact on your interpretation of the events. In this example, theology, it ends up superseding what the historical report it says. And that's why, in order that we can come to a deeper understanding about how the event of Karbala reached us, we'll discuss this topic in the following stages. Number one, we'll examine that what role does history play in the life of a human being. From the second level, we'll examine that what three stages did the recording of the event of Ashura go through. Number three, we'll examine that what four categories of individuals are those who narrated the event of Karbala. From the fourth level, we'll examine the value of Ziyaratun Nahiya as a source for the details on the day of Ashura. And fifthly, we'll examine the early Maqatil and the sources which speak about this event. Now, when it comes to the first level, the question comes up, is that what is the value of history in the life of a human being? You see, when you examine insan, when you examine the human being, out of all of God's creation, the human being is the only existing creation that can engage with its own history. And based upon this engagement with history, they are able to deduce a better future for themselves. As in Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. The Imam very famously says in Nahjul Balagha that even though I did not live with the people from the past, I studied their lives so much, it's as if I walked with them. That Amir al-Mu'mineen had such a profound understanding of history that he says it is as if I walked with them. And this goes to show that history has a very important position even in our current lives. When you look at the Quran, for example, you find that the Quran is replete with historical examples. The Quran, for example, will mention the story of Yusuf, a prophet in the past. It will mention about the Queen of Sheba. It will mention a number of different historical individuals. But on one side, you find that despite all of this, there are certain narrations which point to the study of history not being a useful art form as well. On one side, we have narrations showing its importance. And on another side, there are narrations that show it is not high on the priority list. For example, there's a narration al-Kafi where an individual was in the mosque. And when this man was in Masjid al-Nabawi, the people would surround him from all sides. And as they were surrounding him from all sides, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, the Prophet sees this person being surrounded and he says that, who is this man? They say, Rasulullah, this man is an allama. This man is somebody who is the most learned. Rasulullah says that, what is he learned in? They say that he is learned in the genealogy of the Arabs and the events of Jahiliyyah and in the poetry of the Arabs. Rasulullah says this is that knowledge that if you gain that knowledge, it doesn't benefit you. And if you don't gain that knowledge, it doesn't harm you. In other words, this narration seems to imply that the study of history is not a positive reality in and of itself. But at the second level, it shows that there were a group of individuals, even in pre-Islamic Arabia, who dedicated themselves to the recording of history. Now, the balanced understanding in between these two narrations is found within one verse of the Quran. And Allah, He says in this verse that لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ إِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. That when Allah refers to the mention of these various stories in the Quran, He says that within these stories is a lesson for those who ponder. So in reality, that history which gains a value for us is that history which is a lesson. And it is that history which is beyond just mere historical facts. And that is the reality of the remembrance of Ashura. Our remembrance of Ashura is not simply a historical remembrance, but rather we remember Ashura because it is a devotional act, because it is an act of ibadah to remember Ashura. You know, when we look at the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt would go through great care to remember this event. That it's stated very famously that when water was placed in front of Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi, that when water was placed in front of the Imam would begin to cry. And when the Imam would see a butcher, he would say that, did you give this animal water? Did you give food to this animal? When they would say yes, he would say, Qutila abi adshanan, that my father was killed thirsty. That why does the Imam do this? Imam Zainul Abidin is not doing this because he's a weak-hearted individual. But no, Imam Zainul Abidin is doing this because the remembrance of Ashura is something which enlivens this religion. And the remembrance of Ashura is something which enlivens the hearts of the believers. That is why Rasulullah says, Inna al-Husayn misbahul huda wa safinatun najat. That Hussein is the lamp of guidance and the ark of salvation. And if anyone wants that light of guidance, then they must come to those gatherings where Imam al-Hussein is remembered. So in that sense, at the first level, we find that history that we remember of Ashura is that history which gives us a remembrance of the event of Imam al-Hussein and the message of Imam al-Hussein. But now at the second level, the question is, that many people ask, is that if everyone died on the day of Ashura from the side of Imam al-Hussein, at the end of the day, who were those individuals recording the event on the day of Ashura? That how do we know, for example, that Imam al-Hussein goes into the middle of the desert and he speaks to Nafi' ibn Hilal, that if Imam al-Hussein is in the middle of the desert, who is there to watch Imam al-Hussein and to record this conversation, for example? Or if we know that Imam al-Hussein has a conversation in the tents with the women, who is there to record these conversations? You see, when you look at the narrators on the event of Ashura, you find that they're divided into 4 categories. The first category of individuals who narrated the event of Karbala were those individuals on the side of Yazid. One may say that how is it that we can take the reports of somebody upon the side of Banu Umayyah? Oftentimes in majalis, you'll hear the name of Hamid ibn Muslim or Humayd ibn Muslim. Hamid ibn Muslim was a scribe for Banu Umayyah, that he was hired by the Umayyads to record that event. So the question is that how can we rely upon the reports of Hamid ibn Muslim? You see, in history, there is something which is called the criterion of embarrassment. In other words, if somebody is writing about themselves, right, they're going to want to show those aspects which are positive. They're not going to write that I was a thief or that I was an evil person. That is something that you'll naturally want to avoid. Now, if these individuals are recording the crimes of those on their own side, this shows that this is something that we can rely upon. That if Hurmala is saying, I fired the arrow into the 6-month infant of Hussein, this is something which is not a positive thing. And if he is admitting doing this action, in such an example, we can rely upon it. So we find this is the first group. The second group who narrated the event on the day of Ashura were a group of the companions of Imam al-Hussein who remained alive after the event. You see, there were a number of individuals that even though they went to Karbala, they were not martyred in Karbala from amongst the men. One of those individuals is Hassan ibn al-Hassan al-Mutanna. Hassan ibn Hassan al-Mutanna is the son of Imam al-Hassan. And today in the world, there are many Hassani Sadat, especially in North Africa. The question is, these Hassani Sayyids, whom do they trace their lineage through? They trace their lineage through Hassan ibn Hassan al-Mutanna. Hassan ibn Hassan was an individual who was wounded on the day of Ashura. And when he was wounded on the day of Ashura, the individuals from the side of his mother, the tribesmen from that side, they take him to Kufa after he was wounded instead of finishing him off. And he ends up being one of the narrators of the event of Karbala. Another individual was an individual by the name of Uqba ibn Sam'an or Aqaba ibn Saman. Uqba ibn Saman is a narrator who was with Imam al-Hussein from Medina to Karbala, and he was the servant of Rabab, the wife of Imam al-Hussein, the mother of Ali Asghar. You know, on these nights, you've heard the famous narration that Imam al-Hussein falls asleep. And when the Imam wakes up, he is saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And Ali Akbar, he comes to his father and he says, Oh father, that why have you said this? The Imam says that I saw in my dream there were horse riders who were coming towards me. And this symbolizes that our death is upon us. And Ali Akbar says that, Oh father, alasna alal haq, that are we not on the truth? That who is the narrator of this event? The narrator of this event is Uqba ibn Sam'an. It is stated that this Uqba ibn Saman, he was with Imam al-Hussein from Medina to Karbala, and he ends up, because he is a servant, he fights in the battle, but they decide not to kill him, and he ends up being one of the narrators of Karbala. A third individual who was on the side of Imam al-Hussein, but was not killed, was Ad-Dahaq al-Mashriqi. Ad-Dahaq al-Mashriqi is an individual that Tabari often reports from Dahaq al-Mashriqi. Dahaq al-Mashriqi was an interesting individual. It's stated that he says to Imam al-Hussein that I'll join you in this journey. But whenever the circumstances are such that there is no chance that you are going to get out alive, then you allow me to go away freely. Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, when he becomes surrounded, when he is alone, Dahaq, he comes to the Imam and he says to the Imam that, do you remember that promise that you had made me? That when you were alone, you will allow me to go? The Imam says, Anta fi hillin min bayati. that you are free from any allegiance towards me and you are allowed to go. But take your horse and leave as far as you can. Because anyone who hears my call in the final moments but does not support me will be subject to the torment and the azab of Allah. So you find that this was another individual. Another individual who was there in Ashura but was not killed was an individual by the name of Abu Tumama. This individual, Muwakka ibn Tumama al-Asadi. Muwakka or Murakka, both of them have been mentioned. This individual, both of his arms were cut on the day of Ashura, and he was laying unconscious amongst the bodies. As he was laying unconscious amongst the bodies, and they wanted to collect the bodies from the side of Imam al-Hussein, they decided that they will not kill him, but rather they will exile him. So all of these examples go to show that there were individuals on the side of Imam al-Hussein who were not martyred on the day of Ashura, and they served as important narrators of this event. So this was the second group. The third group of individuals who narrated the event of Ashura were the women of Ali Muhammad. The women of Ali Muhammad were there from Karbala. They were there at that moment. Many of our narrations, they come from Sayyida Zainab, from Kulthum, who would describe the event. And at the fourth level, we find that the final group of individuals who would narrate the event of the day of Ashura were the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Oftentimes, people ask the question that, how do we know how many wounds were on the body of Imam al-Hussein? That was there anyone to count the body of the Imam, the wounds on the body of the Imam? We say that we know this because Imam as-Sadiq told us how many wounds were there. And we know this because Imam al-Baqir would mention it in his narrations. We know this because Imam Zainul Abidin would say that the body of my father was so wounded that there was not even the spot of the ring of a stone, the stone of a ring that wasn't wounded upon the body of my father. So you find that this was the next level. And in this manner, one important source for the musibah of Imam al-Hussein is Ziyaratun Nahiya. You see, in Ziyaratun Nahiya, Imam Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif, you'll have to bear with me, I'm a bit under the weather. I don't have my normal energy at this moment. But you find that Imam Sahib al-Zaman, he narrates the musibah of his grandfather. And over here, the musibah of Imam al-Hussein is not from the tongue of any khatib, any zakir, any orator, but it is the grandson of Imam al-Hussein telling the masayib of his grandfather. You see, many historical problems are solved by Ziyaratun Nahiya. For example, people ask the question that how do we know Shimar is the one who killed Imam al-Hussein? Because when you look in the Maqatil, when you look in the historical records, either they mention that it was Shimar, or they mention that it was Khuli, or they mention that it was Hussein ibn Numair, or they mention that it was Sinan ibn Anas, these four individuals. So the question is, if the historical records are mentioning four individuals, then how are we so confident that it was Shimar who was the qatil of Sayyid al-Shuhada? We say this because Imam al-Zaman in Ziyaratun Nahiya, he says, وَالشِّمَرْ جَالِسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِكَ. Oh, my grandfather, a point had come when Shimar was sitting upon your chest. وَمُولِغٌ سَيْفَهُ عَلَى نَهْرِكَ. And he was moving his sword to slaughter you. وَقَابِضٌ عَلَى شَيْبَتِكَ بِيَدِهِ. And he grabbed your beard with his hand. وَضَابِهٌ لَكَ بِمُحَنَّدِهِ. And he would take his dagger as he was slaughtering you. You see, this historical issue is solved by Ziyaratun Nahiya. And at the second level, there are many masayib of Sayyid al-Shuhada, that we are aware of those masayib because of Ziyaratun Nahiya. You've heard your entire lives that Imam al-Husayn's body was trampled after he passed away. But Imam al-Zaman in Ziyaratun Nahiya, he says that my grandfather was alive and his body was being trampled. He says, Hatta nakasuka an jawadik. A point it came, oh my grandfather, you fell off your horse. فَحَوَيْتَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ جَرِيحًا. And you fell on the ground as you were wounded. تَتَاءُقُ الْخُيُولُ بِحَوَافِرِهَا. And the hooves of the horses would go into your body as you fell off your horse. No, I'll give you another example. You've heard that the women of Ahlul Bayt, their hands were tied with ropes upon them. Imam al-Zaman says it wasn't just ropes on the arms of the women of Ali Muhammad. He says, وَالصُّبِيُّ كَالْعَبِيدِ وَالصُّفِّدُ فِي الْحَدِيدِ. He says that you were taken as captives like servants, and they had tied chains of iron upon your arms. And then look how descriptive the musibah of Imam al-Zaman is. The Imam, he says, وَمَغْلُولَةٌ أَيْدِيكُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنَعْكِكُمْ. That these ropes of iron, these chains of iron, when they tied your arms, were behind your neck when they tied them to you. You see, in this way, we come to know about the details of the event of Ashura. And that is why there were many significant individuals who wrote the maqatil about Sayyid al-Shuhada. The word maqtal means the account of the killing of an individual. The first person to write a maqtal about Imam al-Husayn was a companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam by the name of Asbagh ibn Nabata. Many of you have heard in the Masayib of Amir al-Mu'mineen that Asbagh would wait outside the house of the Imam. It is stated that he survives the event, he survives and lives on after the event of Karbala, even though he was not there. And he is a person who would record this event. Another individual who wrote a maqtal of Imam al-Husayn, the second oldest maqtal, was by Jabir ibn Yazid al-Ju'fi, who was a companion of Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq. The third oldest maqtal was by Ammar al-Dohni, another companion of Imam al-Baqir. And at the fourth level, we find that the fourth oldest maqtal is the oldest one which survives, and that is the maqtal of Lut ibn Yahya, known as Abu Mikhnaf. So in that sense, we find that after these events were reported, at the second level, they began to be compiled, and at the third level, we had the stage of critical analysis. That is why many people, when they ask these questions, that what was the age of Ali Akbar on the day of Ashura? Was there actually a wedding of Hazrat Qasim on the day of Ashura? The key thing to remember is, yes, there is a historical discussion which is important, but Karbala is far beyond history. And Karbala is in the realm of devotion. It is in the realm of ibadah. And that is why on these nights, one of the greatest masayib of Karbala that we remember is the musibah of Ali Akbar. You know, even Imam al-Zaman in Ziyaratun Nahiya, when he sends a salam upon his grandfather, he makes sure to say, As-salamu ala Aliyin al-Akbar, that salam be upon Ali Akbar. The masayib of Ali Akbar is that masayib which certain scholars have said that only on special occasions recite the masayib of Ali Akbar. Because that masayib is that masayib of a parent bidding farewell to their son in the prime of their life. You know, it's stated that there was once a caravan that left from Mazandaran to reach Karbala. When this caravan, it reaches Karbala, the narrator of this event, Abbas Mazandarani, he says that when I opened my book of Musibah, the first page that came up was the Masaib of Ali Akbar. And the night was Laylatul Jummah, Friday night. That night in the Haram of Hussein, I recited the Masaib of Ali Akbar. And as I was reciting the Masaib of Ali Akbar, it's as if everyone in the Haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada was crying. He says that night, after I recited the Musibah of Ali Akbar, I went to sleep. And when I went to sleep, I saw Aba Abdullah within my dream. I said, "Oh Hussein, that why have you come to me?" The Imam said, "Oh Abbas Mazandarani, I came for 3 reasons. The first reason is that anyone who does my ziyarah, I visit them as well. The second reason is that I want you to give my salam to one of our Shia within your town." Abbas says, "What Shia is this?" The Imam, he says, "This Shia of ours, wherever there is a majlis for me, he sits by the shoes and he organizes the shoes at that majlis." But the third thing Imam al-Hussein says to this individual, he says, "Oh Abbas Mazandarani, don't ever recite the Masaib of Ali Akbar in my shrine on a Friday night." Abbas Mazandarani says, "Oh my master, did I recite anything wrong?" The Imam says, "You didn't recite anything wrong, but on Friday night, the soul of my mother Fatima Zahra, she comes towards my shrine and she can handle anyone's masaib, but she can't handle the musibah of Ali Akbar." She says, "Oh Hussein, how did you lift the body of your young son on the day of Ashura, Hussein?" That who was Ali Akbar? Ali Akbar is that individual that Imam al-Hussein very famously says that kana khalkan wa khulkan wa mantikan bi rasulik, that he was the one who resembled the Prophet Muhammad in his figure, in his actions, and within his speech. You know, when the day of Ashura it began, the day of Ashura it began with the azan of Ali Akbar. You know, Ali Akbar wasn't the muazzin of the Sayyid al-Shuhada, but Imam al-Hussein on that day wanted Ali Akbar to be the one who recited the adhan. You know, whenever you lose a loved one, you remember that loved one through the most smallest of things. You'll see the items of that loved one, you'll remember them. You'll go to a place that they used to be, you'll remember them. I say that how much Zainab and Kulthum felt after Karbala, that every time they would hear the adhan of Fajr, maybe they would remember the azan of Ali Akbar on the day of Ashura. You know, the day of Ashura it came. When the day of Ashura it came, Imam al-Hussein would stop each of his family members. Qasim he would stop. Aun and Muhammad he would stop. Aba Fadl Abbas he would stop. But when Ali Akbar asked for ijazah from the Imam said, "Taqaddam ya waladi, oh my son, go fight. But oh Ali Akbar, go and make sure you bid farewell to your aunt Zainab, oh Ali Akbar." Ali Akbar, he goes to the tent of the women to bid farewell. As Ali Akbar, he goes to the tent of the women, Hamid ibn Muslim, he says that 7 times the curtain of the tent would open, 7 times the curtain it would close. that every time Ali Akbar wanted to leave, one of the women would pull Ali Akbar back in towards the tent. That it is as if a janaza, it is as if a body was being taken away for the final time. And then Hamid ibn Muslimi says that as I was watching the tents, I saw that somebody was grabbing the shirt of Ali Akbar. I thought to myself that if it was someone older, they would grab by the shoulder of Ali Akbar. But who is it grabbing the shirt of Ali Akbar? When I came closer, I saw that it was a 3.5-year-old girl. She was holding the shirt of her brother Ali Akbar. That it was Sakina, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein. She would say, Irham ghurbatana ya Ali Akbar. Oh Akbar, have mercy upon our ghurbat, oh Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar, he bids farewell to the women. After that, Ali Akbar goes to his mother Layla. That how difficult must it be for a mother to bid farewell for the final time. That when Ali Akbar goes towards Layla, Layla says, Oh Ali Akbar, that you are the fruit of my heart, oh Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar says, Oh my mother Layla, if you tell me not to go, I won't go to the Maqtal. But oh my mother, what will you say to our grandmother Fatima Zahra if she says to you that was Hussein more beloved or Ali Akbar more beloved to you? After that you find that Ali Akbar, he goes to his father Sayyid al-Shuhada. He begins to ask permission from Imam al-Hussein to go towards the Maqtal. The Imam says, Oh Akbar, you have my ijaza. But oh Ali Akbar, as you're fighting, keep turning around so your father can see your face, oh Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar, he gets upon his horse. He begins to go towards the Maqtal. As Ali Akbar is going towards the Maqtal, he hears footsteps behind him. Ali Akbar, he turns around, and as Ali Akbar, he turns around, he sees his father with his hand upon his back. Ali Akbar says, Oh Baba, oh father, you already gave me ijaza. You already gave me permission. The Imam says, Oh Ali Akbar, you don't know what it's like for a father to bid farewell to his son for the final time, oh Ali Akbar. Ya Ali Akbar, lasta sahib al-awlad, you don't have any children, oh Ali Akbar. It's stated that Ali Akbar, he goes to the battlefield, and as Ali Akbar is fighting on the battlefield, فَيَنْظُرُ الْحُسَيْنِ إِلَى وَجْهِ Ali Akbar, that Hussein would watch the face of Ali Akbar, وَتَنْظُرُ اللَّيْلَ إِلَى وَجْهِ الْحُسَيْنِ, and Layla would watch the face of Aba Abdullah. That whenever the Imam's face was worried, Layla would know that Ali Akbar was in difficulty. One point it comes that there was worry on the face of Imam al-Hussein. Layla says, Ya Aba Abdullah, is our Ali Akbar in difficulty? The Imam says, Oh Layla, the dua of her mother for her child is mustajab. Layla, she goes, she says, Ya Radda Yusuf ila Yaqub wa Ismail ila Hajra urdud ilayya waladi Ali, that oh the one who returned Yusuf to Yaqub, oh the one who returned Ismail to Hajra, return my Ali Akbar back towards me. Ali Akbar, he comes back to the tent. And when he comes back to the tent, Ali Akbar says, Ya Abate, O Baba, O father, Al-Atashu qad qatalani, wa tiqlu al-hadid qad ajhadani. That, O father, the thirst is killing me, O father. And O father, the weight of this armor is very heavy upon me. You know, on the day of Siffin, Muhammad al-Hanafiya came to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Imam Ali began to pour water on the armor of Muhammad al-Hanafiya. And Muhammad al-Hanafiya said, "Oh father, why are you pouring this water?" Imam said that, "Oh Muhammad, it is a hot day. I want this armor to be cool for you today." I say, "Oh Ali ibn Abi Talib, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, look at your Hussein today in Karbala. That Ali Akbar has come to ask for water. The Imam doesn't have anything to give towards him." The Imam says, "Oh Ali Akbar, your grandfather Rasulullah will give you from the pool of Kauthar, oh Ali Akbar. Oh Ali Akbar, go for the final time." Ali Akbar, he goes towards the Maqtal, he is fighting. One point it comes, an arrow is fired. The chest of Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar falls to the ground. He says, "Ya Abate, oh father." Imam al-Hussein, some riwayat, they say that the Imam falls to the ground. Upon his elbows for some moments, he begins to go to the body of Ali Akbar. Now Sayyid al-Shuhada, he's sitting by the body of Ali Akbar. As the Imam is sitting by the body of Ali Akbar, you know what your Imam did by the body of his son? The Maqtal, it says, فَوَضَعَ خَدُّهُ عَلَى خَدِّهِ. The Imam places his cheek on the cheek of The Imam places his cheek on the cheek of Ali Akbar. He says, "Ala dunya badak al-afa ya Ali Akbar." That, "Oh Ali Akbar, this world is dirt after you, oh Ali Akbar. Oh Ali Akbar, this world has no value after you, oh Ali Akbar." The Imam is looking at Ali Akbar, but Ali Akbar is covering his chest. It's as if he doesn't want his father to see something. Ali Akbar, he finally moves his hand off his chest. The Imam sees that broken arrow in the chest of Ali Akbar. Imam al-Hussein on the plains of Karbala, he places one hand on the arrow. He places one hand on the chest of Ali Akbar. He begins to pour. He begins to pull. He says, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." He looks towards Najaf. He says, "Oh Baba, lifting the door of Khaybar was easy. Look at Hussein taking this." Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. مات من حسين.